Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first living room of 2018. Thank you all for coming tonight, everyone in the room and anyone who might be signing in online, as well as anybody who might come back and watch later. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're very excited to have you all tonight to kick off this new year with this amazing panel of patients and this conversation around why it's important to know your cancer. And you guys hear us talk about this in these meetings all the time, and we're very grateful to these folks, some from close and some from far, which we're also very excited about, to come in and tell their stories. So thank you all for coming. We're going to do business as usual sort of tonight. We'll go around the room and then tell our stories. I'm going to let the patient panel tell the story. I'll do a little introduction for the woman, Dr. Morosini, who doesn't really need an introduction. She's been here many, many times, either as a guest or as a speaker. And then we'll kick off the conversation and sort of the more educational part of this meeting. And Joanne, just because you're sitting right to my right, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind. And for anybody who might be new tonight, don't forget to pick up the mic when you're talking, or else the wonderful people tuning in tonight won't be able to hear you.
Ready?
Ready.
Okay, my name is Joanne Berridge. I'm from Belmont, California, right here. I was diagnosed in October 2016 with adenocarcinoma, stage 4. It was EGFR, which has given me the opportunity to have the targeted therapy of Tarceva. I have been on Tarceva for 16 months with the usual side effects, though nothing I can't live with, and have, throughout the scans, things keep getting smaller and more disappeared and more disappeared. My Mets were to bone and adrenal gland, by the way. And the tumor was in my right middle lobe, about 5 centimeters, and below 2, now 1 and something now. I think that's good?
Yeah, that's very good. I don't know if I've ever asked the question before, but what brought you to the doctor? How did you?
Oh, I've said it every time, and
Yeah,
I didn't say it
maybe I
this
just
time.
don't remember.
Coughing for a year that was misdiagnosed. Very important, and I usually start with that.
Yeah,
Thank you,
yeah,
Danielle.
yeah.
Yes, I'm one of those that got to stage 4 and didn't need to.
Yeah.
One of many.
Oh, she's gone. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Sally, and I was very lucky. I was found early. I put myself into a lung cancer study, the ILCAP, and 9 years ago, there was a change, and I was found at stage 1A, had my lower right lobe removed, and even though I have nodules and ground glass and stuff, it's all very small, and I'm very lucky, and it's almost 9 years. I think I just said that.
Thank you, Sally. Early detection.
My name is Tina, and I was diagnosed in 2010, November, and I did test positive for EGFR, but I did go through chemo and radiation. Anyway, I don't know, whatever. And then after that, and my scans were clear after treatment, they decided to put me on Tarceva, more, I think, maintenance or preventative or something, but anyway, I'm still on it, and no evidence of disease 7 years later. So
Tina, aren't you on a trial right now?
yes, but I'm not getting a lot of information about it, but I am on a blood-based biopsy trial research study at Stanford, and they did find they said the smallest detectable sloughed off dead cancer cell in my blood, in my DNA of my blood, which they don't really know what that means. Maybe I would always show that, or maybe it will go away, but they don't know what that really means right now, but they're working on it. So, but it's all very exciting. The blood biopsies are very, very exciting.
I'm Rick, and I'm her husband. and she's been amazing for the last 7 years. She's just been hanging in there and doing her thing, and it's amazing, really amazing.
We pass it back to Fred. Thanks, Rick.
My name is Fred Palmer. I was diagnosed in October of 2013 with non-small cell lung cancer and currently under immunotherapy.
I'm Diane. I'm from Sunnyvale, and this is my husband, Doug. I was diagnosed in September of 2016, non-small cell lung cancer, adenocarcinoma, EGFR positive. Was on Iressa for about 10 months and then moved on to chemotherapy. And I received 6 rounds of carboplatin, Alimta, and Avastin. Got really good response with that. And I've had 2 rounds of maintenance chemo with Alimta and Avastin. And stage 4, the diagnosis.
Okay. Did you have any genomic markers? Did you say EGFR?
Yeah, EGFR positive.
Okay. And then you went to chemo?
After the Iressa, yes.
Okay.
Diane, do you know if they tested you for T790?
They did, and I was negative.
Okay.
And at that point, I guess now there's some talk of Tagrisso possibly being useful with the negative, but at that point, that information wasn't out.
Got it.
Exactly. Okay.
She's done her homework.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rick. I was diagnosed in February of 2015 with adenocarcinoma, stage 4, being treated through Kaiser Sunnyvale, or Santa Clara. I went through a year of chemotherapy, 14 rounds, different treatments. Started with carboplatin Alimta and then went Alimta maintenance, and then one of my tumors was not responding, and I had surgery to remove my adrenal gland, and then I went on to Taxotere, and after that, 14 cycles, I've been no evidence of disease, so I've been cancer-free for 23 months now. I've got a PET scan due next week, so starting to ramp up that scanxiety and starting to dust off the meditation tapes and get through all that. So glad to be here.
Thanks, Rick. I should say, too, so this is the second time this month that I've gotten to see Sally and Tina and Rick because you know how they also go to the Stanford support group meeting, and they talk about us all the time. And because of that, we were asked to go down and speak. So Michelle and I went down and gave a little spiel to. Oh, was Diane there? You were there too, Diane. That's right. On the foundation and kind of who we are and what we do. So it's good to see everybody again. Yeah, it's cool.
That's great.
Hi, my name is Stephen Coe, and I actually live in the Fox City down the road here. I was diagnosed with stage 4, also like adenocarcinoma, EGFR positive. And actually, I was in Vancouver when I was sick. There was no symptom at all. I was actually studying, was doing a 2-week course up there in Vancouver, and ended up in the Vancouver hospital for about 9 days, and they flew me back to Stanford here to do my treatment. Yeah, so I'm currently under Tasifa, and as I mentioned, EGFR positive, and I believe I'm also having the quite high expression of the PL1. So hopefully it's potentially suitable for immunotherapy, which I personally am very, very interested of. Yeah, so that's me. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
I am Katie Wilcox. I work here for the foundation, and if anybody wants to fundraise or get involved with an event, come talk with me and my team. We'd be more than happy to talk to you about the opportunities we have.
Oh, they've got one, Katie. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Ron. My wife, Joan, was EGFR positive. She had stage 4 adenocarcinoma, lung cancer. And she was misdiagnosed in the beginning, too. She had trouble walking. It had metastasized to her hips and just caused great hip pain, and they just thought it was arthritis. And after pushing for it, finally had a scan that showed up and said, "Oh, there's something wrong with your bone here." And then they figured out it was lung cancer. So we did 15 lines of treatment over 45 months, and we had we looked at 4 different clinical trials, participated in 3 of them.
Hi, I'm Colleen Sturdivant, and I'm a caregiver for my sister Terry Kennedy, who is she was diagnosed 2.5 years ago, stage 4, also misdiagnosed as
EGFR
asthma.
sister.
She is 53 years old. She has EGFR. Started out T790M. She's currently something called C797N. I know. Yeah, N, not S. So we're currently sort of trying to understand that. And she unfortunately has been on afatinib, Tagrisso, Tarceva, 4 clinical trials. So we've been through quite the ringer. So we're right now researching and trying to figure out our next move. But I'm also here tonight, one, because I'm finally here in person. I've been on the phone many times. And I will honored to also represent a new group we're forming called the EGFR Resistors. If any of you have heard about us already. We're partnering with Bonnie on that, and we're working on that. So I wanted to come here and represent that, and also hopefully at some point get to talk about it even more.
Is Terry online?
She unfortunately was diagnosed with pneumonia today, so she isn't feeling well. So I don't think she's on, although I was just speaking to her.
Okay.
So she's been running a fever, and she had the talc procedure done, and unfortunately had some complications to it.
Okay.
Because she has, what do you call it?
Fusion.
Pleural infusion. Pleural infusion, yeah. So she's not feeling quite up to it, but yeah. So hopefully she's on silently.
Okay. Give her our love.
I will definitely. I'm
Okay.
seeing her tomorrow, but yeah.
Okay.
So we wanted to represent.
Okay.
Thanks, Colleen.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Linsenmeyer. I'm here with my colleague, Regina. We're friends from the community. We're from Genentech, but we're here to learn from all of you and to offer support and just to observe. Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Regina C. Meunier, and exactly what Jeremy just said.
Ditto.
Did you guys want to say? Yeah.
Katie? Yeah, there you go. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. This is my puppy Evie, and my husband Wayne, and my son Dylan. I'll go ahead and let Wayne talk more about what's happening.
Hi, my name is Wayne. My wife Rebecca was diagnosed with non-small cell adenocarcinoma in November of last year. She started treatment a couple of weeks. No, this is she started her second round of chemotherapy, or second times. Last time we were here, we were supposed to start treatment in like the next week. We learned a lot since then about dealing with insurance and just a lot of those logistical hangups that really were really frustrating. But we're really happy that, she's starting treatment. She's super happy. She's always excited to go. And, she said jokingly, I've never been so happy to be poisoned. And I think that's a great attitude.
Yeah.
She hasn't tested positive for any of the big 4 mutations. We're waiting for the Foundation 1 results to return. And we went to Stanford today, and they were looking at some CT scan that just kind of randomly showed up that some of the other doctors hadn't shown up, looked at, and they gave us some new information that there may be some other nodules in her body that shows that maybe her disease is a little bit more advanced. And so, that's something that we're going to have to do soon. And also, previously she had a small 2 millimeters blip in her brain, which is probably going to be haunting us for a while until we figure out what that is. So that's going to be pretty much keeping us busy for a while. And we want to thank Ron for really helping us during these last couple of months with his words of wisdom and this group here. And you guys are all awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Julia Drake from Genentech, and I came just to learn from all of you as well as just be inspired. Thank you for all you do for each other, for teaching us and inspiring us, and just being advocates for those in the community suffering. Thank you.
You guys got a lot of Genentech folks here tonight. So I'm Tien. I'm also from Genentech. This is my third time here, and every single time I learn something new from everyone. So thanks for letting us join you.
Sarah Fielding, also from Genentech. I work on alectinib, so it's so nice to hear everyone's stories, and really look forward to meeting you guys tonight.
Sarah Rose, I also work at Genentech. I work on alectinib. I actually, I've been emailing back and forth with Jessica, and we were supposed to have a phone call, and then she's like, oh, something came up, and I was like, I'm going to be there too. So this is a wonderful experience. Thanks for having us.
Anybody else? Okay. Good. Sorry, does anybody online want to say anything before I move to the panel?
They just hope Terry feels better.
What, is she online?
She's not, but everybody else did.
Okay.
Thank you all for sharing your stories, and with that, I'm gonna take it to the patient panel before, like I said, I do a small intro to Dr. Morosini. What I am gonna ask of the patient panel is that you kind of start from the beginning, because that's what this is really about. What your, from your how you were diagnosed, what that kind of looked like prior to starting your first treatment. That way, when Deborah goes back into kind of digging deeper on what the knowing your cancer looks like, she'll have a little better understanding.
I did ask them to hold back a little bit.
Did you? So not too much. Oh, all right, well then forget everything I just said.
You can now decide
and say whatever you want.
To.
Yeah.
But
yeah, no, that's great. That's fine.
Just so we have more to go.
Through. Yeah, got it.
That would be helpful.
Perfect.
Thanks.
So, Dawn, do you want to start?
Try to interpret our instructions.
Yeah. Sorry.
My name is Don Stranathan. I'm from Santa Rosa, California, and I'm being treated at Kaiser Permanente in Santa Rosa. And I'd just like to thank all the people that are here from Genentech, because if it wasn't for Genentech, I probably wouldn't be on the panel today. So I was diagnosed with stage 4 in June of 2009. Adenocarcinoma. I had no symptoms. Actually, a week before I was diagnosed, I climbed to the top of Mount Tam, which was 4,000 feet, 21-mile hike. So, it was, had no idea I had lung cancer. A week later, they found a tumor inside my bronchus tube that had it 90% blocked, and a spot on my apex region. When that was biopsied, that's how I was staged at stage 4. I went from that, they immediately did radiation because they were concerned that the tumor inside my bronchus tube was going to collapse my lungs. So they did radiation, 15 hits of radiation. Then I did a core needle biopsy on my left lung, and that was also adenocarcinoma. So originally I was offered Taxol and Carbo as chemotherapy, and I'd heard about Avastin, so I advocated to have Avastin added to my mix, which they did. So I got all 3. After the 6 cycles of chemotherapy, they ran a CT scan, and they saw a couple of nodules in my liver, which they put me on Gemzar, or gemcitabine. And after 3 cycles of that, the nodules disappeared. I went ahead and finished all 6 cycles, and then was immediately given Tarceva. I'm grateful to say I got 6 years out of Tarceva before I showed progression. I progressed in 2015. I had a new tumor in my left lung that was triggered by a blood clot, and then was put on immunotherapy, went on Opdivo, 37 treatments, and then I had pericardial fluids that were removed from my heart, and they were tested malignant. So that was in this last August. So I was moved to Tecentriq, which is a Genentech immunotherapy. And in the interim, also a year ago, I had my right lung collapse, not from the cancer, but from probably a lung bleb or blister that might have been caused from previous radiation. So I had a VAS procedure, stapled off part of my right lung, and then I did a TALC procedure also, and they glued my right lung open. I was actually supposed to be in Budapest right now, but a week ago, and Bonnie can, attest to this, you don't avoid side effects. And about a week before my flight left, I was becoming short of breath. So I went in to check with my oncologist. Or X-ray revealed I have pleural effusion in my left lung, and a CT scan showed that I have 4 lymph nodes that are enlarged in my neck. So probably tomorrow or Thursday, I'm going to go in for a core biopsy on that. I'm getting it tested at Foundation Medicine. And more than likely, as long as there's no squamous component, I'll probably start on a triplet of Keytruda, Alimta, and Carbo. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
How do you follow that up?
Right.
Oh, man. Hang in there, brother. You're a survivor, obviously. My name's Dave. I live locally in Belmont, and thank you to Nikki from Genentech, who I was able to meet when I was first diagnosed, which was last year, back in March.
We found him at a dog park.
At the dog park, yes.
Oh, gosh.
Yes, that's the dog park story. But anyway, my initial meeting with my physician, they thought I had pneumonia because I was experiencing back pain. And so they put me on an antibiotic for about 2 weeks and came back and took a second X-ray to show that nothing had changed in 2 weeks. So they immediately sent me down 10 minutes later for a CT scan, which showed a spot on the lung. And 2 hours later, I was across the bay instead of San Carlos. I'm a PAMF patient. So instead of locally here in San Carlos, at the PAMF facility, I drove over to Fremont, where I met with a pulmonologist who happened to be college buddies with my GP. And he proceeded to review the scan with me and take out the pleural effusion with would you call it a needle? With a needle.
Syringe.
A big syringe. They just said bend over and you don't look. Anyway, they extracted about a wine bottle full of liquid out of my back.
Okay, that's it. I'm done for wine.
It's always about the wine.
Demonstrating. A pleural tap.
All right, pleural tap. Oh, and anyway, now I know why I was so uncomfortable because that's a lot of fluid to be stuck between your ribs and your lungs.
Oh, yeah.
So they told me that it would be a few days before they could analyze that fluid to find out if it was lung cancer, but it might be lung cancer, it might be TB, it might be something else. And 5 days later, they called me up and told me it was lung cancer. And they had already scheduled for me a PET scan, an MRI in the brain, and an oncology appointment. That was all set up on that phone call. So the next week was very busy, and meanwhile, the MRI showed 6 lesions in the brain. So I went through SRS and had 5 days worth of treatments on my brain, having a stereotactic radiosurgery, which seemed to be fine. And scans, about a week, maybe a week later, when I went with my oncologist, the information came back that I was EGFR, so that I would be on Tarceva. And so that's why I thank Nikki and the whole team and everybody else who's here from Genentech, so thank you all for coming. And I started Tarceva maybe 2 weeks after my diagnosis, and I've been on ever since. So it's coming up on my 10th or 11th month.
And your rash is better.
And the rash is better, yes.
Yeah.
Thanks to, I believe it was Joanne who gave me to a derm doctor who we call the Queen of Tarceva. And she knows how to deal with this, and she has taught me. And so it's definitely better. Thank you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, well, and plus it's showtime,
Right, exactly.
Got to get ready.
I don't need the mic. That's for you guys. I'm Lisa Goldman. I was diagnosed about 4 years ago, stage 4 adenocarcinoma. I have a similar story to many people here. I was misdiagnosed with asthma and bronchitis and allergies and anything but lung cancer. None of these things I had a history of, but nobody thought to send me to get a CT for several months until it was pretty dire, and I ended up in the ICU for a week and on oxygen for a few months. But I was lucky enough to start my treatment or get my I was with Pam. By the way, they have pulmonologists here, like local. You don't have to go to Fremont.
Yeah.
No, but I think you are.
Like 2 blocks away. Just saying.
Anyway, so I had my biopsy at El Camino Hospital, which, unbeknownst to me, they had worked with the foundation to make sure that their biopsies from lung biopsies were all sent for genetic testing. So the only thing I can say, the downside at the time was that they did it sequentially. So rather than sending it to some place like Foundation Medicine, where you get the full panel all at once and you get your results very quickly, I didn't find out for almost 2 months that I was ROS1 positive. And in the meantime, I started chemotherapy. So I went through 8 months of chemotherapy and then switched to my targeted medication, which I've been on for over like 3 years and 4 months now.
And what are you on?
I'm on Xalkori or crizotinib.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We're skipping me for now.
So I'm Jessica Steinberg, and I'm from Canby, Oregon. I have Bell's palsy right now, but it's not cancer related, so I'm good. I was diagnosed in April 2011, and at the time they thought it was a stage 1 localized tumor. So I went in to surgery. They were going to just remove the tumor, and that was going to be it. And I woke up in ICU to learn that that was not the case, that the cancer was much more diffuse than they realized, and all through my mediastinum. So they took out a lung lobe, and every node they took to test was positive. So I started chemo and chest radiation concurrently. I was tested for mutation and nothing came back. There was no sign of a mutation. So then I went to get a second opinion and had another genetic test done, and again, there was no mutation detected. So I was on chemo and chest radiation, and then I had brain mets, so I had whole brain radiation, and still nothing is showing up in terms of a mutation. And I think by the third time I was tested, and it was a really random thing because it was a clinical trial that had nothing to do with me. It was measuring physician response to patient progression. But if you joined that little research study, you would get all this other genetic testing. So I, why not? So I signed up for it. And then when the cancer kind of was back, they said, well, we have to take you off of it now because you progressed. And I said, well, wait a minute. I want those test results. I want those genetic test results. They were mine. They were mine. And he was like, hadn't even thought of that.
Physician response.
Yeah. So actually I got them, and that's when I found out I was ALK positive. And that was like amazing to be able to start targeted therapy. So my first one was Xalkori, and it was like my first lover. I mean, it was just unbelievable how good I felt. I'm being serious.
That has to be a quote on the package.
No, I'm being serious. I made a love video with him and everything. Yeah, it was beautiful. It really was a beautiful time. It only lasted 18 months. And then the cancer was back in my brain. And my then oncologist was like, okay, you're going to have to get your affairs in order. There's really nothing we can do. We could possibly do some salvage because the whole brain radiation I had was like maximum lifetime dose. And he said, but you're going to have cognitive difficulties, and we can't really predict how brain damage will be. I was like, okay, I'm a single mom. My kids are little. Like, how effective of a parent am I going to be if I'm cognitively impaired? I was like, no, that's not happening. And then I went home and I was like, I forget this whole thing about getting my affairs in order. That is not what I'm doing. This is not the end of my story. And I started looking for clinical trials. And I remembered I had a friend at that was working at Genentech from college. By the way, I'm a total Genentech groupie also. I remembered hearing something about this new lung cancer drug that could cross the blood-brain barrier. So I started like researching, trying to find the trials of it. And I found one in Portland, Oregon. And it was like unbelievable that it was like right there, so close to home and exactly what I needed. So I was like determined to get on it. And it was not easy because the hospital did not want to release my tissue. I guess tissue's like gold. Maybe it's getting less worth something, but I couldn't get them to release it, and they needed it to retest and make sure I could get on the trial. So I literally was planning a sit-in because I had been not successful at all. The doctors weren't able to do it. I wasn't able to do it. And so I was just like, that's it. I'm just going to go in there and sit until they release it. And just, I think the threat of that, they released it. So it was confirmed, and I was the first person in the Portland, Oregon trial of what was then my new lover, and he was RO542482, and I named him Rocco. And it's true. This is like a serious thing. And I have been with him almost 4 years now. Our anniversary is in February. So I took my first dose in February, and we've been together ever since. And it's been amazing. I feel so good, and no brain mets. I just had scans not too long ago. My chest is totally clear, nothing. And I have a couple little spots on my brain that have been unchanged for years now. So everything's good. I'm in a good place besides the Bell's palsy. But things are good. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you.
And I'm your Words with Friend.
Yeah, we play Words with Friends.
Yeah.
And I was so starstruck when she singled me out to play. I was like,
she's a demon.
Oh my God, Bonnie Addario. I'm totally starstruck.
She
meeting
beats
you.
me all the time. Her and Rocco.
It is because of Rocco, yeah. Fueled by Rocco.
Hi everyone, my name is Anne-Marie Cerato and I'm from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I was diagnosed originally with stage 3A adenocarcinoma in 2009. It was very shocking and unexpected. I wasn't sick, I had no symptoms. I was just working at my desk one night when I felt a lump on my collarbone and I thought, I gotta go to the doctors. So I went to my GP and he examined me and didn't really think there was anything untowards and sent me for an x-ray anyway. And then phoned me up a week later and said, there's like a nipple shadow on this x-ray. And I thought, like, nipple shadows? Nipples cast shadows? I don't think so. So he sent me for CT, and of course the CT confirmed that there was something there. And so apologetically, he said, we have to do a fine needle biopsy. And about a week after the needle biopsy, I remember checking my phone and seeing 5 messages, 1 from the doctor and 6 from my mother. And it was to tell me my results. And so I went to the doctors, and I remember thinking it was so odd that there was no one else there. But I still didn't really click in that there was something really, really wrong. And so he came into the room and he said, I've never seen anything like this in someone so young. And I'm so sorry you have lung cancer. And so I immediately went into fight mode and said, okay, well, balls to the wall, and let's do it. And so the next day I was in head-to-toe scans to see where my primary was. They ended up doing surgery, exploratory surgery, because they also thought I was at an early stage. But when they examined me, I woke up to Tom and his friends, because I named my tumor Tom. So I texted a friend. Yeah, I texted my friend and I said, Tom has friends. And they didn't know what the hell I was talking about. So anyway, so I was diagnosed at 3A, and at that time I received concurrent chemoradiation, 2 cycles of cisplatin and etoposide. I didn't lose all my hair, but I lost enough of it to look like a Benedictine monk, which no one proceeded to tell me until I checked in the mirror and said, oh my God, I have no hair. Anyway, I also had surgery. They removed my right middle lobe and did a wedge resection. And then I did another 2 cycles of cisplatin and vinorelbine. I got about a year's worth of no evidence of disease, and then things started popping up on my CT. I got really anxious and asked my doctor what they were, because I figured if at least I knew what it was, I could, get my head around it and, go back into fight mode. And she said, you're assuming that there's something we can do for you. It's better to not know. And I was like, whoa. So the next month I knew, and they said that it had kind of, I guess, differentiated itself to be a progression. So at that time, she said, my physician at the time, or oncologist at the time, said, we'll test you for EGFR and I'll present your case to the tumor panel, but you can't have surgery and you can't have radiation, and so you're really healthy, go home and we'll wait and watch. And that just was not good enough for me, because I knew what that meant at that time. I figured, well, okay, I've got maybe 2 good years. So I packed my bags, and I was ready to pack my bags and go to Europe when I stumbled upon an article on a blog, and it said, new hope for lung cancer patients, and I thought, oh my God, that's me. So I looked at it, and it was talking about a late phase trial for this drug, Xalkori, and I immediately picked up the phone and called my nurse and said, what is this stuff? Let me get me on it. I don't care where it is, what it costs, what we do. Just let's do it. And she had never heard of it. So they found a doctor that did, and it was right down sort of the highway from where I live. And I was shocked because I was being treated at like one of the best cancer hospitals in Toronto. We have 2. And this study was happening like outside in some like small regional hospital. But I went and I got tested. They sent my tumor sample to Cleveland at the time, and they told me I'd have to wait for 3 weeks. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to Italy and I'm gonna eat, drink, and be merry, and whatever happens, happens. And I got a phone call saying that I was positive, and I thought, oh my God, I won the lottery. So when I got back, I got admitted to the trial and had my first dose, and within 3 weeks, I had no nodules. And I remained NED for almost 5 years. And in that time, I traveled, I found my husband, I got married, and then I progressed.
Is his name Tom?
And Tom, no, his name is not Tom, it's Patrick.
That would be so weird.
It would have been really weird. No, it would have been terrible. It would not have happened. So I've had this amazing, amazing time, and then I had just bought a house, because you have stage 4 cancer, buy a house. So I bought a house, and then I progressed. So I am now I'm in a clinical trial for lorlatinib. I was also in a clinical trial for crizotinib at the time. So I did 86 cycles of Xalkori, crizotinib, and I've done 26 cycles of lorlatinib. I've been NED for about a year now, and so I'm hoping that we get a good long run on this one too. So.
Wow. Awesome. Thanks, you guys. Thank you for sharing your stories, and I hope it wasn't too much detail, Deborah. You good? Okay. Perfect. So as I said earlier, we're very, very happy to have our guest moderator here tonight, Dr. Deborah Morosini. She is an expert in genomics, and I think it's really important. Like I said, we talk all the time about knowing your cancer, and that means knowing, even if you don't have a marker, what that might also look like. So most of you also know that Deborah is very, very passionate about lung cancer. Her sister, for those of you who may not know, was Dana Reeves, and Dana was diagnosed with lung cancer at a very, very young age. I'm going to let Deborah go on and give a little bit more about that story and how lung cancer entered your life and how you've chosen to make it your life's passion.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So hi, everybody. I'm seeing so many people I haven't seen in a long time. And it's really great to be here with you. I will start with my sister, because this really all started with my sister, and that's how I met the Addarios. And Bonnie's disease-free day is my sister's birthday. So March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, is a shared day. And my sister was also EGFR positive. So she was diagnosed in 2005, and she was diagnosed at stage 4. She was asymptomatic. I was a physician already. And her husband, who's Christopher Reeve, the actor best known for Superman, had died 9 months before. So, despite people thinking, well, did she get lung cancer because she was really sad? I hope for this group that I've dispelled that myth. But it is something, there is a lot of, it was sort of my first intro into blame and stigma in all the ways it can come to you, right? Even in the loving way of like, we pretty much know why she got this because she had such a hard time. And I would say, no, she didn't get it because of that. Something happened to her genome, right? And that's why she got lung cancer. Very healthy, non-smoker. I started to really understand through those questions and others, I hadn't thought of lung cancer as a stigmatized disease. And, we all have, I bet every person in this room has literally been asked, did you smoke? What about these other things? And it seemed so peculiar as a stigmatized disease at that time. My first time to Capitol Hill, I was sitting with a really great leader there, and she said, well, my brother died of lung cancer, but he deserved it. He was a smoker. So it was really, for me, I'm a physician, but I'm more of a humanist. I have a master's in social work, and so to me, this was just this compelling idea of that there was this disease that was the largest cancer killer, but it was also presenting a kind of crisis of compassion, I thought. And that was really what I became interested in more than anything, and did a lot of, as much as I could, towards activating communities around this. And I think what I've seen this group do, Bonnie and family and friends and all of you, become such an amazingly powerful force for good. And as we're on this topic, I think we can come out of here this evening with ideas of, we hear these different barriers, now how do we go after them? Because I'm definitely that motivated towards those things. So I'm not really a genomics expert, but I see my pal Krista in the back, whom some of you know, and there's probably someone else, but I can't see you. And Foundation Medicine was founded in 2013 and was this cool thing about that could help people discover cancer genomics. And I, physician, everything else, lung cancer, I was like, what's cancer genomics? Right? That's how many, 4 years ago? What's that? And I watched the cartoon about 25 times and finally felt like, okay, I kind of get it. So it is something that before these past 5 years, we really didn't have in our lexicon. And the Addario Foundation has been really strong in working from genomics, but this is a very rarefied atmosphere, right? And everyone here, when we hear your stories, I'm still struck by the fact that you as a young lung cancer patient, it took your doctor so long to say, unusual biology. What's driving it?
They
right?
actually said that I was a rare case.
Well,
No
and it
kidding.
is rare, right? I mean, it's rare for young people to get cancer. And so, as physicians, mostly we think if it's rare, then there's probably a really good cause and a specific cause, right? I'm going to do a little bit about genomics. And again, hearing that from you. So for anyone, just as a quick overview, and this will not be long, why do we care about genomics? Because true fact, you can all walk home and make up a song about it. Cancer is a disease of the genome, right? So it's not, you don't just get it from being sad, and you maybe you are, but mostly not. And really it's because things happen to the DNA that you were born with. Now there's inherited cancers, right? And those are caused by your genetics, but cancer that's not inherited happens to your regular old genes, and something either environmental mostly will affect those genes and cause something to happen. Either they get a mutation or it breaks, two genes come together, and that causes cancer. So all cancers are caused by that. So given that, there have grown to be many drugs, Genentech, I'll have to throw you a Genentech, amongst companies, and where I am, Loxo, have developed targeted therapies to attack those very defects in the genome. So that's why you want to know your genomics. Like, simple answer. If people go, why should you know your genomics? It's simply like, what's causing this cancer? Because not just like, oh, that's so intellectual, but there may be something targetable, right? And, I think I've spoken to so many of you. I mean, Don and I are phone pals from way back, and I answer a lot of calls where I am now at Loxo Oncology. And again, we throw around this term, is it, finding something targetable, but that's the whole point. You want a medicine that's gonna work and treat your cancer, right? That's the end result. That's gonna be as few symptoms as possible, more time to go to Budapest without interruption and go to Italy and buy houses and have children and, get Bell's palsy, right? I mean, you want to basically, you need to get there at least once. So again, that's why we care about genomics. And as you've heard from here, and there are a couple things that really stuck out as common things that make me want to drop my jaw, is this idea that not all tests are created equal, right? So we've heard, I got a genomic test, I got another test, I got another test. And literally I'm thinking, please, how about everyone starts to understand that it really would be helpful and in the best interest of the patient to do something that is really going to tell you what is going on. So I'm no longer at Foundation Medicine, so I'm really allowed to talk about this like wild. But again, to me, or at least understand that's not what you're getting. And so few people really grasp that, right? So on that note, I think, that sort of stands out as one of the commonalities, or not. I mean, some of you just got it right away, but if you were, and I'll start with you. When they were telling you we're going to keep doing these tests, did you have, and again, I don't expect you did because I wouldn't have, did they say, well, what kind of tests they're going to do, or where does that fit in, and how do we think we can change that? And anyone can shout out about that because it's kind of appalling, right? that you think like they're doing it, they're fixing my oil, and you come back and they're like, yeah, it wasn't real, it was like something else other than oil. I mean, it just doesn't, these are simple things. They're not complicated. Yes, they can cost money, but for things to be sort of tested and not really, or you don't know, I think it's unacceptable to me, right? And for patients to be held prey to that kind of medicine.
Can I ask a question before we go to the sort of the standardization?
After my lecture?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is one of the things that so EGFR was one of the first, the first target found in lung cancer, right?
Well,
not the
KRAS.
first target, but the first druggable target, right?
Tarceva.
Yeah. So what does it take to discover these targets? Because I'm thinking of the pie right now and how much is still left.
Yep.
What does it take to find them, and what's it gonna take to fill up the rest of the pie?
So target finding is a big, complicated thing, and part of it is going to be, as drug companies, we read literature, and you start to see. So the way you figure out all these targets is the first things that happened is when the economy crashed and we gave government money to do the Cancer Genome Atlas. This started to look at thousands of cancer genomes, right? So not our healthy genetics, but our cancer genomes. And if you start to see recurring patterns across those, recurring genes that pop up across cancers are your first clue. And again, we have some that are not yet, easily druggable. P53 mutations, I'm sure all of you on your Foundation Medicine reports are like, yeah, I have that. I have mTOR, yeah. So you're gonna have KRAS. So you're gonna have these genes that are either passengers or drivers, but some of them aren't druggable. So then you start to see, but you'll start to do tests, even with cell lines or animal models. If I block that pathway, and you can tell that there's kind of ways to do that, is it blockable, and does the cancer stop? Right, because some pathways you can block and they're like, the cancer keeps growing. So then you would think that's not a good target. Fusions, of which we have our ROS fusions and our ALK fusion people, fusions are highly targetable because they're very specific, and also I'm not a scientist. I'm really not a genomics expert. I'm an MD, but just caveat. However, fusions are highly targetable. So at Loxo, we have 2 drugs that are both targeting fusions currently. They're more rare events, but we know as people who make drugs, and your group discovered in Genomics of Young Lung an EGFR fusion that's targetable. So, you sort of start to look at the usual suspects, but then also the other great answer to that question is there are targets that are kind of held hostage in other cancers. I'm going to pick on, in breast cancer, everyone here knows people who have breast cancer or may have had breast cancer. You hear about HER2, right? And that's an expression of a gene called ERBB2. So initially, you only looked for ERBB2 in breast cancer patients, but again, we now know that that occurs across a multitude of cancers.
And in men too.
Sorry?
And in men too.
And in men too, across a multitude of cancers. Right, so and one of the things we've been able to do at Loxo is we did a basket trial where we had a drug that hit a certain kind of gene fusion, TRAC fusion, and we let any kind of cancer patient with a TRAC fusion come in and had an 85% response rate regardless of tumor type. So when you look at that pie, you sort of look across all the different targets that exist maybe in other cancers, and some of those may be where that lung cancer pie gets filled in, right? So there's already ERBB2. And then you start to just see, when you look at these large data sets like those from Foundation Medicine, that's also going to show you targets. I mean, that's their income source, right? Is, looking at that and selling that data to developers. You also start to see targets, and I'm forget, is it Tina? You're doing a study? I was about to applaud you because in that very study, they may begin to detect earlier markers of progression. So then again, that becomes a target, right? Like now we have for EGFR, Tagrisso, and so forth. But that only came after people and physicians and patients religiously tested their tumors upon progression. We'll see the same, hopefully, for all these drugs. I mean, we developed 2 levels of inhibitors, one for the initial target and one for the expected acquired resistance, which is also something we were able to do, and we were able to take patients who progressed and the next day put them on a new drug. So we developed it at the same time. And so, not to be braggy, but I mean, that's the kind of thing drug developers can do, is say, I'm going to look at this whole pathway and I'm going to start predicting models of resistance and then have a drug for that patient going forward so that you get to Budapest.
And hence the reason for clinical trials.
Yeah. I mean, yes, absolutely. And
does anybody have any questions before we move on? No? Okay. Sorry. And I already forgot what your question was.
No, I didn't.
Interrupted. Okay.
No, I think, so I guess the question is, and it's for everyone, when you were, and all of you are long-term patients, which is amazing, what did you understand, if anything, about genomic testing? And why don't we just kind of take everyone? Did you ever heard of it, and how do you understand it now? How do you tell your friends about it? Because if anything, I mean, you can save thousands of lives, just the people in this room, by telling people this stuff, right? And giving them a hand on it.
When I was diagnosed in 2009, I didn't know anything about genomic testing because I was never even offered sequential sequencing. So in 2009, I had adenocarcinoma, but I was never offered even to be tested for EGFR, alpha, ROS1. It wasn't until I had progression, and I learned about it over the years that I was on a targeted therapy, but I went back to my healthcare provider, and asked if I could get my tissue tested, and there wasn't enough tissue left to test it. So I knew it was something that was important, but it wasn't until November of 2015, because I was stable for all those years on on a targeted therapy,
Yep.
Tarceva, that I knew that when I had progression, that was the first thing I needed to do was get testing. And I think that's when we met. I reached out to Bonnie, and Bonnie referred me to you. And I had my first Foundation 1
So
report.
that was the first time you had comprehensive
first
testing?
time.
Okay.
And then what I had discovered was that even though I had been stable on Tarceva for over 6 years, I either didn't have the EGFR mutation or it had completely disappeared.
Oh, right.
Right. So either way, I'm grateful.
Yeah, so you had
I
a
got
funny
to
case,
hear.
right.
So, and now since that original Foundation 1 report, I had progression in I had fluids in my periocardial sac last August, and I reached out again to Foundation to see if they could spin that down to a pellet or paraffin-embedded tissue, and they could, so they tested that fluid. And then again, I've got progression again, so I'm looking into the blood biopsy and also another core biopsy, because what I've learned over the years, if nothing else, is that cancer mutates. I have a very good friend that I spin with at a bicycle spin class. 7 years he had no driver mutations. He was given drugs, but no driver mutations. 7 years later, while he was looking into a clinical trial at Stanford, they decided to test his tumor again and had the ALK mutation and started on Xalkori and alectinib, and he's doing amazing at 10.5 years, stage 4. So you never know, and like Bonnie always says, information is power. So I try to, anytime I can, get as much as I can to make a decision, because if I were to go on just sequential sequencing the standard EGFR-ALK, I would never know about mutations like RET and NTRK, which are some amazing treatments for.
And to your point, Don, 80% of all cancer patients, not just lung cancer patients, are seen in the community arena. And not always do all of the physicians in the community have the opportunity to be updated on the latest and greatest, new findings in lung cancer, because that's what we're concerned about here. So, in my mind, it's important, most important, for you to be as smart or smarter and more educated than the physician, so you can go into your doctor and ask all of these questions about everything you're hearing tonight. It's like, well, what about this? And what about that? And what about that? And why can't I have this? And it's time for me to have another genomic test. Or does that make sense?
Well, and what I love about the way you're telling this story is that it's become a part of your common sense, right? That now, and it has to be, right? But when you think of the sort of before and after you knew about this, and when you talk to any of your friends who have cancer, and I'm sure all of you do this, you're starting to teach them from the beginning. They say, oh, I have this, and I'm getting my affairs in order, or whatever. And you take a breath and you think, if they're open to this right now, I'm really gonna, I could help them save their life, or give them years more of their life, because they may have something targetable and they're just not hearing about it. So what got you, and then I'm going to move on from you, Don, but what convinced you to even start down this pathway of genomic testing? What was the most compelling piece of information? Because if we have that, then that helps us get that, extend this to other people.
I think the most important thing is being connected with other survivors. Where I've learned the most is and I tell people that are newly diagnosed, a lot of them tell me, well, I'm not on social media, I don't have a Facebook account, I'm not on Twitter. And the main thing I tell them, and I just shared this with a gentleman in my cancer support group on Monday, I said, you need to have a social media ambassador, a caregiver. If you're not on Facebook, you're not on Twitter, you have a niece, a nephew, a son, or a daughter that is, have them connect with me, and I'll connect you to the EGFR resistor group, all the other groups, because that's where I've learned the most about lung cancer is, people, Lisa, we all share information. And, I've learned about side effects that my pharmacy infusion pharmacist wasn't even aware of on immunotherapy. And I said, hey, all my friends are reporting this side effect. And it's amazing.
He's like, thanks for that.
Exactly.
It's all reportable.
Too,
yeah, I mean, he's going to report
clinical trials, as patients, we hear which clinical trials are working probably before the FDA does,
Right,
because
right.
we're hearing it from the horse's mouth. We're
Right.
hearing from our friend that, hey, I've gotten 4 stable scans already on that trial, and I'm getting amazing results. So I think the most critical thing, and what was critical for me, is get connected with other survivors.
That's awesome.
I think that's such an important statement to make, and it's why I want to reiterate in the room and to those online, a big thank you for all of you for sharing your stories, especially in a live environment like this, and then moving forward after, because you never know who's watching or who's going to go back and watch, and they learn something. And it's also why I encourage people to speak up and ask questions, even if they don't want it to be about them. That's what this is for. Stephen, do you have a question? Yeah. Just.
So this is my first time here about genomic testing. I'm going to find more about it. Yeah. The question that I have is, with these kind of like DNA sequencing profiling, is it, let's say if you have a profile, right? Does that profile only applies to that person, right? It doesn't apply to other people.
Right. So what you're getting, if you get a genomic test, it's done on your tumor, right? So if you tested tissue from your finger or tissue from the tumor, you're going to get different results, because it's only going to be looking at the DNA of the tissue you've submitted, right? So they're going to take a piece of your tumor, and right now it's in a paraffin block, which means that the tumor was cut up and it was, frozen in time in formalin and put into paraffin, and it's filed away at your hospital, right?
That's fine. Yeah, I probably don't understand a lot of techniques, but what I'm trying to understand is, okay, I forget your name, Dawn?
Yeah.
Dawn, right? Okay, let's say Dawn has a profile.
Yep.
And Dawn told me, okay, with this profile, I'm going this kind of treatment, that kind of treatment.
Right.
Okay, yeah. So that piece of information is irrelevant for me, right?
Absolutely. Every tumor is unique and has a distinctive, and the piece for that is, as a physician, you can't tell by when a patient walks in a room what their genomics are, right? So that's also why I said, can everyone talk? Because I can't say, oh yeah, she's a typical ROS1 patient, right? I mean, you need to look at the genomics to understand what is druggable in your tumor.
Go first.
We have a regular visitor to our living room. His name is Dr. David Gandera. He's from UCS Davis. And one thing he said in one of our very first living rooms has stuck with me forever. He asked all the patients around the room, and I'm going to ask you, how many different kinds of lung cancer do you think there are?
We don't.
100?
We don't know yet.
100.
Yeah.
Wow, Rick's heard that before.
How many?
there are patients.
As many as there are patients that have lung cancer are as many cancers, because each patient is uniquely different.
But what I don't want you to misunderstand is the relevance of, if you are an EGFR patient or an ALK patient, of learning about what else is going on in that space.
Maybe I should qualify my comment just now, because yes, it's good to know so many things. Okay, when I found out my cancer last May, I spent a whole month, in the internet, basically, talking about lung cancer. But at the same time, I have to tell myself, I have to figure out a way to filter out irrelevant information.
Absolutely.
Right? Because, I don't know what this information is good or not. How am I going to filter out the irrelevant information? Right? I only have so much time to understand some little things. I don't want garbage, basically, right?
Yeah.
And I think that goes back, Deborah, to what you were saying about sort of standardized testing and what's gold standard. What's the best thing you can do right now in order to filter out and or weed out what's might be irrelevant versus what's relevant?
Right. Well, I think, yeah. And it's getting either it's understanding so that you can understand what it's asking for a test that's ideally a comprehensive test, which would mean they're going to look at hundreds and hundreds of genes in a way that can tell you what's happening in your tumor. And then those things may or may not be targetable. You know, you may have genomics where you're like, this is great, I hit a gold mine, or you don't, but then you know, right? Then you can drop lots of worry, or you can say, oh wow, I have this alteration, and you're going to focus on that. And do you want to say a little bit about what you guys have done with the Ross Wonders? Because
Sure.
I think that's helpful because it's genomically based.
Yeah. So I would say to you, at the top level, if you identify that you're EGFR or ALK or ROS1, go and find the social media presence for that. Within that, no patient is identical to another. You know, why am I on Xalkori for over 3 years and some other ROS1ers get less than a year, and then some ROS1ers are ahead of me 5 years plus? You know, there's micro differences that make a big difference in how we respond to medication and what treatments we're going to respond to. But at least I've narrowed my focus. I focus only on ROS1 developments, and I know nothing about what's going on in the EGFR world at all, because I have to filter out and focus what's going to be relevant for me. And not everything in the ROS1 space is going to be relevant to me today, but I keep that's a narrow enough window that I can keep tabs on that. And what Deborah had brought up is several years ago, I and a few other ROS1 patients got together and started the ROS1 Facebook group. So if there are any ROS1 positive patients online, or you have any friends out there, please send them to us. We have over 200 patients from around the world on our Facebook group. We have a website, and we're starting to do research, real research on our biospecimens to develop new treatments. So we're not just sharing information, which is incredibly valuable, but we're actually driving research and hopefully extending our lives.
And to Lisa's point, you kind of always need to be a step in front of where you are. You're EGFR, you know where you are now. You always need to be kind of looking at what is the next line option for me. And I think that's far enough to go, because sometimes too much information can be really, confusing and get you off track. But to Lisa's point, study your marker and what's happening out there. But also carry with you in your back pocket that we have actually seen patients that start with a particular marker, and upon progression somewhere along the way, they might have started with EGFR and progressed along the way, and now they're ALK. Another opportunity. Is that going to be you? Maybe, maybe not. But information is powerful. And, staying informed and staying abreast of what's happening to you personally is a really good thing.
Yeah, and I think it's insanely important especially when you're doing it in a community type environment where you might not have the benefit of being with a lung specialist at an academic center who's, neck deep in this day in and day out. Patients will say all the time, well, why do I have to be the one to bring it back to my physician? But things are happening so fast and furiously, and now it's not just lung cancer, it's all these subtypes, and then it's resistance to those subtypes, and it's a lot. Yeah. So imagine, and it's not just lung cancer they're treating whatever walks in the door, right? So it's so important to know as much as you can and then have those conversations with your doctor.
And that's actually why we're here. Yeah. We're here to keep that education going and keep all of those opportunities on the table.
So don't get me wrong, I'm not against knowing. I'm actually all for knowing.
Yeah.
And it's very important to do that. Yeah. And myself included, I have friends that I've known since I have my cancer. I mean, when they first found out the cancer, they don't even know what the questions to ask the doctors. I mean, they felt so helpless because they don't know what the questions to ask.
Right.
And I think knowing is important, and knowing can help direct people to certain directions. I mean, the only thing that I am scared of is by saying it in certain authoritative way, I gave the wrong impression for people. Okay, this is the way that you get a cure, or this is the way that you get get hope, because sometimes there may not be hope. So that's the part I'm very concerned about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get all this information, I know all these things, I tell people, okay, but they may just listen based on what they think I know, okay, yeah, and they're not going to find out more, and I may be pointing them to the wrong direction.
And not every EGFR mutant patient is going to respond the same way you do or other people do. It's a baseline, it's a place to start, but it's really not good to compare yourself always to other people, because then your expectations, go way up here, and everybody responds differently to different therapies.
Yeah. I think that's a really genuine point, though, is that we all worry about promising false hope or providing false expectations for people. And I probably talk to maybe 50 patients a week from with all different kinds of cancers. And the principle I use in guiding that is one of the hardest things I think for people to manage is regret, that they didn't know something, or that you didn't know what to do for your loved one. And at least if we have the information and we know, then we're not suffering through that regret, no matter what happens. There is a great peace in knowing I did everything I could, not going crazy looking for a million things, but through just cancer genomics alone, you can really buy a lot of peace. And I think, I get patients all the time who think, should I look for this or look for this? It's like, you may find nothing in those genomics. You might find just a bunch of stuff that's never going to help you, but then right? Then you're with that piece and that reality. So, I think that's what I use, if it's helpful for you, as my guiding principle, is to help people manage regret.
I want to share with you, I don't know if I have a marker. I was diagnosed in 2003, and Tarceva was in a clinical trial at that time. So I've never had genomic profiling, but I did have a tumor that was very invasive on my heart. And I found myself, I met with several different physicians, and they were all telling me what I didn't want to hear. And what they were telling me was there was nothing they could do for me. And nothing they could do for me just was not what I was looking for. So I kept searching, and I ended up finding an amazing surgeon and multidisciplinary team up at UCSF. And the surgeon asked me, he said, Bonnie, what do you want from me? And I said, I don't want to die because I did nothing.
Okay.
If I'm going to die, I want to know that I did everything I could possibly do. And he said, okay, I can work with that. Let me give you something that, may or may not work, but let me give you an option. And he did, I accepted. And I think that's all we can ask, that we've done all we can possibly do.
Well, and that he asked you.
What?
And that he asked you.
And he asked
what
me.
do you want?
And
because not everybody wants to do everything.
Because we're huge believers in shared decision making with our physicians and ourselves. That, after we have this conversation, that we can shake hands and say, okay, you get what I need and I get what you need. And I think we can work together.
So, that's such incredibly helpful.
I know when I was told, go home and we'll watch and wait, to me that said go home and die, because, I go to my physicians because they're experts in their field. But as a patient, I've always demanded every test result. I've charted it all so that when I would go into a new specialist, I could just plunk it down and say, here's all the stuff I've been through right now. You can see it, it's there. And it's helped me make decisions, but I see my care providers, all of them, as part of my team. And if there's one member of the team that's saying, there's not much I can do for you, there's nothing I can do for you, it means you don't want to be on my team anymore. Because until I stop fighting, you need to be on my team. And if you're not there, then I need to change team players. And you have to look for your own truth. And I think being an advocate for yourself, if I hadn't advocated for myself, if I hadn't gone and looked like Bonnie, I wouldn't be here today. I would have been dead at 32, and I wouldn't be here. Fact.
Yeah. Okay.
So true. And so were you, did any of you have that same question from your physician? What do you want from me?
No.
Never.
I mean, really, shouldn't that be the first question that your doctor asks?
What are your
you?
goals? Yeah.
What do you want? Yeah, what are your goals?
What do you want from this?
If we look at, Lucy and Paul's book, that was what gives your life meaning? What do you want to do in your last year? What do you want? Right? And we don't, instead we say, you need to go home, do this, you go there, you over here, right? And even just that one pause that David had with you, what do you want me? What do you want
I
from
said,
me?
I want you to hit it out the park for me, or at least try.
Yeah, and I think this is something that we hear about all the time,
that
right? The
question.
shared decision-making, the patient-physician relationship. I mean, they've done studies, they write all these beautiful white papers that make it look like it's happening everywhere, and the truth is it's not. But it's another way that you all, patients and caregivers alike, can raise your voice and say, I noticed you haven't asked me, so here's I'm going to go ahead and tell you, here are my goals of care, and if you can't bring this to me, to Anne Marie's point, I'm going to go ahead and try to find somebody who can.
And even, just as I'm thinking, I would probably have trouble negotiating that conversation, and I'm...
As a physician.
Oh, no, as a person, and I'm super forceful.
Yeah.
And I think, okay, how would I really do that? And maybe it is, maybe we try to find a language where you would say, before we start, I would really like, within this conversation, for you to ask me what I want. Like,
I think a lot of people are hesitant to challenge their physician because you look at them as, your physician, they're the expert, and like, why question that? And I think, no offense to physicians, that a lot of physicians think, well, I'm the expert, so I'm going to tell you what to do. But really, as patients, we need to take our power back and push back a little bit and demand kind of mutual respect, because you are an expert in you and I am an expert in me. And yes, a physician is an expert in medicine, but my bump in my collarbone may not be anything, but it may be something, and it's not normal to my environment, and that's why I'm coming to you to seek advice for what that might be. And it led to cancer, but it could have just been a bump. I could have been getting a cold. But you have to be willing to kind of challenge it and have them not. I mean, I think most people think, oh, they're going to take it personally, and I don't know.
You just said something. You said, I'm going to take my power back. I think you should never give your power away in the first place. And that doesn't mean you have to be, an antagonistic or, a difficult person. But it means you have to continue to fight for yourself and, maintain that power and that ability that you can fight for yourself and advocate for yourself.
I was just going to...
No, you go. You go.
I think we have to be honest, though, and say, there's a lot of work and responsibility involved in that. It's a lot easier just to say, hey, doc, you figure it out and tell me what to do. I love my doctor, but I know that he's very busy with hundreds of patients and very few with my specific ROS1 diagnosis. And it's much easier for me to know the options out there. So that's a lot of pressure and responsibility. So it's not just holding on to power, but it's a commitment, it's a job.
And it's having that scaffolding for the conversation. And I'm wondering, when I think of your patient handbook, it's so amazing. And forgive me that I don't know this, but is there a kind of a check sheet or something for a first visit? And wouldn't that be an amazing thing to be able to go, am I going to get this? And just because we can be humble and go in and say, I've never done this. I'd like to kind of use this as a, for going through my first. I know you guys had an app for a while. But
yeah, there is a checklist it's in the very front of the book, and it's like 26 questions. There's actually 26, not 25 or 20, but 26 questions to ask.
It's like
your
one
doctor.
more.
Yeah. But it could always be better. So.
Yeah. And the difficult part is, how do you get to patients before they need you? So they can carry that list to that first appointment. That's
should
the tough
those
part.
be in waiting rooms?
Right.
I mean, is that the thing?
Exactly.
So you just get, every time you go anywhere, when you come to your living room, there's those questions, and you just start making sure they're everywhere.
I want to just make a comment on something that Lisa just said, because I think it's important and a commitment involved. And It's okay to not want to make that commitment, right? Your goal of care doesn't have to be what you're hearing others' goals of care are, because we talk to plenty of patients on the phone who don't want any of it, right?
Right.
And that's okay. It's a very personal decision, but if the decision is, to be your own advocate.
But it's also okay for your caregiver to be the person that does all of that, right, Ron? Joni just had the luxury of not having to do all of that work. And, Ron was the caretaker, and he did the job.
I think it's important to understand, too, that most doctors are mechanics. They want to fix something that they can address. But we are gardens. We're the gardener. We have a garden to tend. We have the whole ecosystem to worry about, not just the sick plant, but we need to tend the whole thing. So what's important to know, what is your end goal? What is your quality of life you're searching for? And why is it a reason to live? And so the quality of life is a big part of that discussion. The doctor should be asking you, how are you doing? What do you want to do?
Great. Thank you.
It's a great metaphor. Thank you.
Michelle, is there anybody online that needs to say anything? Or did somebody here? Sorry, Deborah, did I miss somebody? Oh, Sam has a comment. Anybody?
I was just going to say that the 26 questions, we have it in the handbook, we have it in the brochure, and we do have a one-pager. So if anybody wants to get the one-pagers and bring them to your doctors, we're happy to give them to you, and you can leave them out there.
That's great, Sam. I didn't even know that. That's awesome. You want to run up and print about 30 of them?
No, they're in the
That's awesome.
thing. They're in the thing.
So I don't want to monopolize the question, so this will be my last one.
That's okay.
And I'm very glad to be here tonight. I mean, it's my first time, and I'm actually feeling a lot of really positive energies. I mean, people wanting to fight for their cancers and so on and so forth. Actually, this coming Friday, I'm going to meet a friend. I mean, he's one of those who's actually thinking about giving up. The question is, when you meet a person like that, what do you say to that person? Yeah, I mean, it's no longer, give me my power back. That's not what he wants to hear.
No.
Okay, what would you say to the person like that? Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, having lived through, I guess, with the mentality of, okay, I'm probably going to die in the next year, and coming to terms with that, and however you get there, you get there. I would respect kind of their feelings. I might say, I understand what you're saying, and I understand, if that's your choice, because it's a choice. It is a choice. And every patient's choice is their own, and it's personal, and they have reasons for it. Maybe they don't think that they're going to make it, or maybe they are suffering, or they don't want to be a burden to their family. And so I think just being there, being a good friend, how would you console someone if they had lost someone? I think it's the same kind of thing. You just empathize, and you could speak about the hopeful things in your life, and maybe that will give that person that spark that they need. Because I've met people that are just like, oh, you know what, I have lung cancer, I don't want to go for surgery, I'm just going to die anyway. And that's not true. There's so much hope to be had, but sometimes people just don't see it. They've got this horrible news, or they're maybe in a funk that they don't know how to climb out of it. And so, I don't think you force anything on them. You just talk to them like you're a friend.
And I think that everybody, you don't know the burdens. And Ron, you talked about quality of life. Is it, you don't know if it's a physical thing, is it a financial thing? Where is it coming from?
There's so many things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when I hear that, I think the best thing we can do in listening to anyone is to try and understand what is this, right? Because it's given to you as a fact. I don't want to do it anymore, and that may be where he ends up. But understanding how that person got there, again, could be an excruciating pain. but there may be something in there that's a misunderstanding. And that if they'd known, they'd say, oh man, I mean, I wish I'd known, now it's too late. And that's great suffering, right? So in alleviating someone's suffering, you're really just trying to understand. And he'll tell you.
I think
if you ask people, like, can you help me understand this? People will tell you. And then you can understand, and they felt understood, and maybe they are ready to be done, right? And that's a choice.
I think you also asked them the question, what can I do for you? Can I research your cancer a little bit more and see if there are any other options out there? And they might be very open to that because they don't want to do it themselves, or they're just not feeling well enough. I think we've all been at a place in our cancer journey, or whatever you want to call it. Somebody said, wink, wink, Lisa. A journey is a vacation. It is not having cancer. But in your in that, I think, you know, and I watched Ron and Joni, and it was such an amazing process, the two of them together, because, you know, he did all of the research and he did all of and he kept her so hopeful that entire time that there was something still, you know, around the corner. You know, and they still may not want you to do that, but I think as a caregiver for a friend or a family member or whoever, to ask, is there something more I can do? Do you want me to do?
Yeah, and I don't know what type of cancer, or if it is even cancer or disease or what it is, but there are groups like this out there for all different types of cancer that you could, you know, help, or call us and we'll point you to the right one.
Any of us.
And we'll do it for you.
Yeah.
We'll do it for you.
Perfect.
I just want to add, I just had a call last week from somebody, a family member of somebody who had just recently been diagnosed with lung cancer, and said, so-and-so doesn't even think that they should go get genomic testing because they were a smoker. And they were just like ready to throw in the towel. And so if it's lung cancer, I do have sort of the caveat that the stigma has a way of making people blame themselves or feel shame or whatever, and not even make the phone call to the foundation or whatever. So I am a little bit of a detective. Like, I respect there is a decision to be made, and sometimes it makes a ton of sense for somebody to say, I'm done. But I want to make sure they have the very basics of information and aren't totally swayed by the stigma.
And that they feel worthy. For you to fight.
And we had in the back.
Hi. I have a comment that kind of echoes what Ron said about doctors being mechanic, and I also have a question. So I think in December, Rebecca had a CT scan after her bronchoscopy. And the purpose of that scan was just to see if there were any blood clots, right? A chest CT. And so what happened was that whoever the radiologist was just checked on the CT and said, okay, we didn't notice any evidence of a clot. And the story was closed. And it wasn't until today when we went and saw a doctor at Stanford who had access to that CT scan, which 2 other facilities also had access to. This was our third opinion. And he noticed that on that scan, there were nodules that had grown a little bit bigger compared to an initial scan that was done in October. So to Ron's point is that, you know, sometimes their job is to look for one thing, but they are so myopic in the way that they were not able to see the bigger picture, which was, you know, something has gotten bigger. And so I don't know how this would have changed or anything, but he gave the impression that, you know, because of this finding, you know, her diagnosis is possibly stage 4, when the initial diagnosis was 3B, and possibly that the first line treatment may be different. And now that we're 2 weeks into our treatment, his advice is just to wait and to see what happens after the next 6 weeks to see how those nodules respond and do a rescan and then figure out what to do at that point, which could be another round of the chemotherapy. Or the original plan was to go on this immunotherapy trial. And so a lot of these things change, and if you have the right information, maybe they would have made a different course of first-line treatment. And right now, we're kind of wondering whether or not we should do something differently or to do as he recommends.
Yep.
And the whole waiting game is just kind of scary.
Stressful.
And
You guys don't have your genomic profiling back yet, though, right?
yeah, they said it's still going to take a while. And
They sent it to, they did the Foundation 1 test?
yeah, it hasn't been back yet. I think what happens is when you get second opinions and possibly third opinion, your tissue gets shipped around.
Yeah.
And so it takes a lot longer, right? Because it has to go back from one place and it has to come home, and then from home it goes there. So this whole process takes a lot longer than we had anticipated.
They can't just send him directly to the next facility. They send him back to the original facility. And it's like, are you kidding?
There's a whole piece of, that we could spend about 3 consecutive living rooms called tissue empowerment. And honestly, I feel like if I ever went to a hospital and needed something, I would say, can I have that tissue now? Because, and I think it really is a strong patient advocacy issue, more than you can even dream of. And hearing, your intention to go sit in that office, honestly, that's often what it does take. And I can't imagine it's legal.
No.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine that it's okay that hospitals, I'm a pathologist by training, right? You have to keep the block to make sure that you didn't misdiagnose somebody. But really, I think it's a very, very big issue for patient empowerment to figure out what is a statement and go after these pathologists, because it's ludicrous.
Yeah. And you also
I'm on
have,
tape, that's awesome. Foundation
Medicine and other testing companies guarantee you 10 days, 10 working days. So that's really 14 days if you add on the weekends. You need to be your own advocate and call and say, are you sure my test results aren't in someone's in baskets?
$50.
And you also need to make them tell you exactly when the tissue was sent out, because it could sit in pathology for days.
Foundation takes up to 3 weeks.
Foundation is Krista can verify, 2 weeks from the time you get the tissue in the door. But there is a room, one of my favorite rooms when I was at Foundation Medicine was a room of people called the Tissue Whisperers. Because it was literally like the most dedicated, calm people in the world, and they just had an endless list of a patient's tissue to call that hospital and politely request every day, multiple times, do you have this? Do you have Miss Jones? And get these runarounds.
Exactly.
And when hospitals start trying, and this whole thing about tissue is quite interesting and bad, but if individual hospitals try to have their own genomic testing program, sometimes the reason they end up throwing their hands up and giving up on that is they can't get the tissue. They buy these machines, and then you all donate money, and they invest, and they have these wings, and they don't have the room of dudes like, hello, this is Michael, and I would like you to send that to me, right? And that's a huge thing, but it really is something, I think, where the patient voice could make a big difference. It could get results back faster. And also, when you hear a story like my friend here who's literally told, we're not going to give it to you, or, we're doing a project at Loxo for kind of an infantile cancer, and we're having hospitals who have this very rare tissue, and they're saying things like, well, we'll give it to you for a couple $100. The moms are requesting this. They've signed consent, and the hospitals are saying, that'll be 200. So it's a very dirty world of this stuff, and I think it's an area where, Danielle, you and I should talk more about it. And I think it's something that doesn't need to be this way, and it is a big patient right issue.
We've had patients, and it's like who owns the tissue, right? And we've had patients go sit and do exactly what you were saying and say, I am not leaving. It's actually coming with me.
Yeah.
And then they call, they're like, I don't know what to do with it. And I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do with it. Right? But yeah, I mean, that's
And
it's
there's
happening.
no
Yeah.
policies about it. And then, of
Yeah.
course, once you've gone through it, you're done, so you're not going to carry it as a
Yeah.
policy issue, but it's a big deal.
And
go ahead, Don.
No, I was just saying, my first report, I had heard it took 2 weeks, and then I was getting frustrated why I wasn't getting it, and then found out that my hospital took 18 days pathology to send it
to
out.
get it
So
out there.
it's only 2 weeks from when they get it, you know. So since then, I follow up with every report, and I'll call in a day or so after I have signed the paperwork, and I say, did you guys send that? Has that been sent yet? You know, because I know that's what happens. It'll sit in
Right.
pathology for 3 weeks before somebody gets around to mailing it
Yeah.
out. So.
And I think it's just an awareness issue that could have a systematic fix, but, you know, it does affect results. Again, you're starting probably chemotherapy when you could have maybe started a targeted therapy. I mean, it really affects patient decision-making. And you're not going to just wait sometimes if you're symptomatic, so.
So Anne Marie had said something earlier that I want to touch on. We have about 20 minutes left about, or no, it wasn't Anne, it was Jessica. You said that you were tested twice. And where are you going?
I'm getting water.
Oh, okay. I was like, hold on, this question's for you. And both times your test came back negative, and it wasn't until the trial that they found it. Deborah, could you explain a little bit how that might happen?
So I was going to ask you, do you know if it is an EML4 ALK fusion, or is it another kind of ALK fusion?
I think it's just ALK.
Regular old. Okay. So that's really not so great. I mean, it's great you have it, but I'm saying, so typically, if you hear about missing an ALK, so in lung cancer, you're going to have kind of the major ones that, you know, there are these guidelines called NCCN guidelines, which are kind of standard of practice across the leading cancer hospitals, and those are kind of aligned with reimbursement for practice, right? So many hospitals could argue, well, we test for the ones that are in guidelines, that where there's a lot of evidence, right? So EGFR, ALK, ROS, and are those, you know, you have to test for them pretty much to be at least standard of care. Sometimes if you hear about people missing an ALK fusion, it's because they're testing for ALK with a different kind of a test. It's called FISH. And with FISH, you have to know the other partner. You're reading these illuminated dots on a slide. I always said if I were the pathologist, I would never have been able to diagnose it because I'm not good at it. So some pathologists are not great at finding these FISH results. There's a high error rate. If you have, but they're mostly looking for EML4 and ALK. You can also have another partner to ALK and have an ALK fusion, and that would never be detected by a FISH reading, and that's the standard way if they're doing just one test at a time that you're looking for ALK. Actually, now there's an IHC, right, that's replaced the Vice's FISH. So again, it would be interesting to kind of look over what they gave you, and I could give a more definitive answer, but I found it pretty surprising when you got to, I didn't have anything, and then you had ALK. I thought, okay, young lung cancer patient, bing, 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 she has an ALK fusion.
When I first met my oncologist, he was like, okay, no problem, because I'm sure you have EGFR. I mean, we know we can target it. You just look like you have EGFR. I'm sure it's EGFR.
Yeah, you do kind of look that now.
So then I go back, a week later, and he's like, well, yeah, you don't.
And there's this roller coaster. I mean, I heard with you, you hear, am I going to have EGFR? No.
Right.
Am I going to have ALK? No. Yeah. And you think about what are the stress hormones we're talking about in those moments, right? I mean, when you're in a garden and you are a garden and you're going through this of like no and yes, it's unnecessary. It's like orchestrated drama, right? It is. I mean, what do you have? You have to find out. Do a test, figure it out, and one, right? Not just this. This is so unkind to patients.
Yeah.
You could be EGFR. Oh, sorry, you're not. Yeah. Maybe you're ALK. No, you're not. And that's wrong. I mean,
Yeah, it is, but the explanation I was given later on how it got missed was that if you have a tumor, like not every part of it
no,
has.
they're really hard to read.
So, yeah, so they could test one part of the tumor and that doesn't show anything, but another part of the tumor could. That
No,
was
there
like-
is, and the official name is heterogeneity.
Mhm.
So heterogeneity is a real thing. But again, that's when it's uncommon to miss something that's as strong a driver that is present, going to be present in most tumor cells. So it's, again, the more we know, the more we can, maybe we start to do case studies or something. I mean, we're doing this in industry where we're really trying to educate by way of, but by way of just people learning when to drill deeper. Like at that moment, you're not thinking, well, what kind of methodology did you use?
Yeah.
But again, those are the questions that can end up saving your life, right? Those are the questions that can save your life, and they're not coming into your head because why would they? And yet, knowing specifically, and maybe it is, I don't know, maybe there is a function for kind of within advocacy to really have a testing advocate or something, a person that really is going to help you through that and know and ask those questions that every patient gets to call up a line and say, this is what I'm looking at now.
We do a lot of that.
Oh, you took
No, you guys do, right? I mean, again,
off your
I
mic.
always love Addario's because you practice medicine without a license, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, right? I think Michelle has. Well, and we always say, ask your doctor about.
Yeah.
I think Michelle has a question online.
Ask me.
Yeah.
So Christina was wondering if there's any info on less common abnormalities of the ALK gene and treatment options. Her husband was found to have a deletion on the ALK gene as opposed to the more common fusions.
I would probably reach out to companies who are running, I mean, you guys may have a different answer, but running ALK trials and see if there's any eligibility on any of those or if they're looking at anything.
Just tell them to email you that question and we can reach out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Don?
I just wanted to make one statement on the biopsy and testing, because I'm going to probably have a core biopsy done tomorrow or Thursday. And a lot of times, the person doing the biopsy has no idea why you're doing it. They've just been told to get the biopsy. And the way I understand it, when the hospital tests for EGFR, ALK, each time they have to use a piece of
You
that
want to try and
tissue.
get 5 cores.
Right. So I always tell the person that's doing the biopsy, I'm having this tissue sent out for genomic sequencing. Get it, if you're in there, get a little extra. Don't, that's what I did the last one.
Yeah.
I said, don't be polite. Take as much as you
Right.
like. And also, I already know from my previous reports that EGFR ALK isn't probably going to show up, and I know I'm getting a Foundation 1 report, so I'm going to tell them, don't even bother testing for EGFR.
Right. That's
Don't
a
waste the
brilliant
tumor.
idea.
Just-
Yeah.
I'm gonna-
Well,
I'm sending it out.
I think it's what you're saying is a very, very valid point. I mean, how many people knew what genomic testing was prior to being diagnosed with cancer? Nobody. Nobody's thinking about it, right? To your point, Dawn, if they're going in for a biopsy, it's to tell you whether or not you have cancer. That's what they're going in for, right? So it really kind of boils down to like this really general awareness that needs to happen, not just with just people, but even further upstream, and we talk about it all the time with like your primary care docs and people like that, right?
And that's why our job is so hard.
Oh.
That's why our job is so hard. And Dave can attest to this. When we first met him, he was just literally diagnosed, and our job is to say, okay, go back and do this, 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 and this. And it would be so much easier if patients knew this before they were diagnosed.
Yeah.
Did you have a question in the back? Yes, I'm sorry. I knew I saw a hand raised.
When you go in and get a genomics test, what are you asking for? Do you just say, give me a genomics test? There's about 25 different cancer oncogenes, and another 500 that are not part of lung cancer. What do you ask for? And is it common to have multiple mutations in a cancer so that, well, that's the question.
I can answer that, but again, I'm biased towards, I was an early team member at Foundation Medicine. I'm a true believer in getting, the overarching idea of comprehensive genomic profiling, because I feel like this isn't where we need to spend a lot of time in our lives, right? Like what's in there? I got it. Let's go, right? And so I think, that's a commercially available test. If you're going to a hospital that has its own test, I would ask, how does it compare to a Foundation Medicine test? We have Krista, my friend there, is a rep. If I met you on the street and I said, where do you live? I'd say, call Krista. She can give you the details of this test and how a patient would ask for it. And it gives patient information in friendly language. That having been said, there are other tests that could work, and I'm not, saying, there's different things people can get, but I'm a believer in a test that's going to tell you with reliability, it's going to look at all the 300 genes because you might have something druggable. So does a tumor have many different kinds of alterations? It's going to depend. There's sort of some truisms there. Some tumors tend to have a lot of mutations or alterations, and others maybe only have one or two. It can depend on what the driving mutation is. So let's say with these fusion-driven cancers, those are often kind of what we'd call a quiet genome. So it was just a perfectly normal genome. One catastrophic event occurred, caused this fusion, and you don't see much else in the way of what are called passenger mutations. Because I like to think of it, is that fusion, it's got it. Okay, it's got the tumor. It's driving it, it's moving things forward. It doesn't need a lot of other things. If you look at other tumors like colon cancer, that's going to be a bunch of repetitive damages to your DNA, so you may have 40 mutations. And then in those cancers, it's often harder to understand what's the driver. So it really is, as Bonnie said, Dave Gandera said, there are, as many different kinds of cancers, many different kinds of lung cancers as there are patients. There are truisms. Squamous cell cancer tends to have more mutations. It tends to be more environmentally related, right? So if you think about, you've got your beautiful clean genome and you get more exposures, either environmental or health, or choices or whatever, you're going to see a more banged up genome.
And isn't it true, Deb, also, that if you get the full 300 genome panel right out the chute, there might be one targetable mutation in there now.
Right.
But as you progress, you could pull back that test and see something else on there that you have that is now targetable that wasn't previously.
Right. And I think there's also, again, I'm with a company called Loxo now. I moved from Foundation, and we target a very rare thing called track fusions. So from the time before we existed, there were probably 40 track fusion patients in the universe of Foundation Medicine who had no treatment on their reports, right? They got it and they said, I've got nothing. Got this, whatever this track thing is. Once we had a drug, we made up a program, and I was at Foundation, and I called all those doctors and said, hi, your patient has this track fusion, and I'm going to send you data about this, and we now have a trial. So for those patients, some of those patients are on this drug for almost 3 years. So they had a report that was like, this is nothing, right? And it was just sitting, and for me, the compelling reason to start that program is I pictured a storage warehouse, and I thought, those people are in a storage warehouse. Nobody knows they have this thing. They got it on their report. It was meaningless at the time. So when you get these comprehensive profiles, the science is catching up, and you may say, hey, what about this thing I had from 2014? I went back a few years. What about this thing from 2014?
Are there any trade-offs that you're giving up when you do comprehensive rather than a FISH test, for example?
Well, I mean, I don't see any. No, I mean, I think, so sometimes people call and they want to just be tested for track. And I can't go to sleep at night knowing I did just that because they're unlikely to have a track fusion. And I say to them, kind of what we were saying, you're really just trying to manage your anxiety and your regret. And if someone knows, I did it. I looked at the thing and I either had something or I didn't. It can really, and I know this from having lost family members and going through this, you're just trying to find peace, right? I mean, really what we're trying to find in this room is, just get a little peace, get with a little peace about it. And so I think this can lead you to more peace, to understand what you're dealing with from the get-go. So no, I don't think. I mean, again, if you have very constrained resources, you can take the betting approach and say, let me see if they have ALK, let me see if they have this, but it's not optimal. I mean, I think resources are a different issue. In a resource-constrained environment, you might have to go that way.
What do you mean by resources?
I mean, like if you're, or just, technology constrained. I mean, if you're talking about practicing in emerging nations, they're not going to be doing genomic testing. So you're going to take bets and you're going to say, and NCCN are going after some of this of what do you do if you only have $1 to spend on healthcare. I mean, even Canada used to be funny about giving out crizotinib.
They're still funny about giving
Yeah. I mean, it's not easy to get on Xalkori.
Alectinib isn't funded in first line.
Yep. I mean, so you even have, great countries with handsome prime ministers.
He's charming.
And
He's
interesting
charming.
moms.
And interesting.
Right. So, and they can't get Xalkori. And you sort of think, wait, what? All of you,
Xalkori,
no Rocco
I think,
or
yeah.
no. Rocco. I mean, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question, but I don't want to. Oh, go ahead.
Hi, Joyce.
We need a mic. I haven't seen Joyce in
So
forever.
I got catching up to do. I don't know what track fusion is. But recently it is not, certain constraints have been limiting my choices. But all of a sudden, after 6 years, so many different therapies, from chemo, radiation, several times, targeted meds, one of which was fabulous. They're all fabulous while they're working. But my most recent blood test showed, for the first time ever, and my treating oncologist was very happy to say, EGFR, you have it, from a blood test. And I just thought, well, now that's just bizarre. And he said, Tarceva. And I'm thinking, it's too easy. That's too simple. I'm not.
You may have an acquired EGFR mutation.
And then I went to my second opinion.
I know. I'm going to say your first name.
Sure, go.
I know Joyce from before because when I was at Foundation Medicine, we found a really not that targetable alteration. And Joyce went on to do extremely well on this drug off-label.
Yeah.
And so that's how I know.
Off-label, how?
Oh, yeah.
Because, no, I mean, so we know ALK exists in lung cancer, but it exists in other cancers as well.
Yeah.
Like, I think, can't think of it now, sorry. Because I have a friend who's an ALK positive patient, but she doesn't have lung cancer. I think she has sarcoma. And so she is having a really hard time trying to access the inhibitor drugs because she has to get off-label access.
Yeah.
And so how do we get more bucket trials going versus it's a lung cancer trial, it's a colon cancer trial? Because we need the bucket information.
Well,
I think it's more beneficial.
So in this case, they're baskets. Buckets are when you take a bunch of different kinds of drugs with one cancer. It took me 4 years to learn it, so I'm just passing it along. So basket is when you take any kind of cancer with one drug. I think the kind of groups like having the Ross Wonders and these fusion or marker-specific groups can bring those forward and say, because that's what drug companies are looking for. Like a bunch of patients that have a thing, right? So I'm happy to talk to you offline about possible resources for getting a patient off-label. But again, I think in your case, you might, genomics are new. You might have developed EGFR mutation.
Well,
Dr.
in
Krista.
any event, it was explained to me later. I went to my second opinion.
Your second
doc at Stanford.
Okay.
Who explained to me that I did not have the mutation. I had an amplification.
Well, okay, but
that Tarceva would not work as
But
well
doesn't
on an
osimertinib work?
amplification. Pardon me?
I think there might be the T790 inhibitor. I'm not sure, but does anyone know if that's working on AMPs? I think
let's talk
Anyway, after.
Yes, after
I
about
was
that.
much more interested in what my second opinion oncologist was suggesting, but familial things were happening. I thought I was moving to New York. She was recommending a very mild chemotherapy with introduced, oh gosh, I'm sorry, my vocabulary is shrinking, antibodies. I'm thinking, are they taking my own antibodies and retraining them like circus animals? Or are they, I don't know what kind of antibodies. But in any event, I thought it might be specific, a protocol specific to Stanford. And that if I was moving to New York, I better not start that.
Yeah.
And so Tarceva is what I'm doing. And I always am looking around the corner for what next, what's going to happen next. The other shoe, it's always going to drop.
You did get an amazing run on the other, for no scientific explanation.
And usually I do whatever my oncologist tells me not to do. I usually, I'm so intuitive that I don't know how I'm still here, but I'm vertical, more than 6 years in now.
It's good to see you.
Well, we're glad you're back, Joyce. We haven't seen you in a while.
I know.
And I don't want to interrupt you, but I just need to do the 2-hour, it's the 2-hour mark. We can continue the conversation as soon as we're done. I just need to kind of close up this part of the meeting by number one, saying thank you again and over. To everyone on the panel, to Deborah, all of these amazing patients, all of you in the room, everyone online, thank you so much for tuning in. Of course, a thank you to our sponsors, Astellas, Bristol Myers Squibb, Celgene, Genentech, Lilly Merck, Novartis, Tesaro, Yahoo Employee Foundation, Peninsula Television. Big round of applause, everybody. They come out every week for everyone. And it takes them a long time to set up, and we don't let them eat any food till we're done. So thank you to the Office Bar and Grill for the food. Obviously to staff who I've seen roaming around in here. But first and foremost, where we started, to all of you. So thank you. We're looking forward to seeing you next month. Next month's topic, just as a quick little teaser, we've got a woman, Clara Lambert, who works for ACCC. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's the Association of Community Cancer Centers. And she's going to talk about financial navigation. So kind of trying to knock down one of those barriers, to your point, access to care, drugs, not just in this country, but what resources are out there to help patients get access to these things that we need. So thank you all for coming.